Shalom, shalom. Thank you for joining us today, wherever you are in the world. Today is World Abolition Day, World Abolition of the Death Penalty Day. And we cannot miss the opportunity to reflect on a politically and morally and spiritually crucial issue of our day. And for me, a big part of what it means to be a religious person is to see beyond surface reality. The surface reality is never the fundamental truth of what we live in. And we have to be able to read and listen to testimony to understand what's happening beyond what we see, what we can see in our day-to-day lives, and understand our complicity and our relationship as citizens to some of the injustices of our day. I'm privileged to be here with a global legal expert and moral expert on this issue. Professor Corinna Lain is the S.D. Roberts and Sandra Moore Professor of Law at the University of Richmond School of Law. Professor Lain's scholarship focuses on two areas: Supreme Court decision-making and the death penalty. And she's published numerous articles and essays about lethal injection over the last decade. And I won't even go into all the places, but we'll post the bio down below for you to see that. And she is the author of a book I want to recommend to you today, The Secrets of the Killing State, The Untold Story of Lethal Injection. This was just released in April of 2025, and I want to recommend this to you. So thank you for taking time to talk today.
Thank you for having me, Rabbi.
So before we go deeper, I wanted to start with the news. I was on the exercise bike this morning looking at the New York Times, and yesterday in Texas, the court halted an execution case of a man with autism who was found guilty of shaking a baby. And I wonder, this case of Robert Robertson, if you have any thoughts on this case.
Yeah, I mean, I'm relieved. It's a case where one of many, where a person was convicted and condemned to death based on science as we knew it. And the scientists, the experts get up in court and they testify, oh, for sure, this injury which killed this child could not have happened unless the child was abused, unless the child was being shaken. Well, now, over a decade later, it turns out none of that's true. None of that's true. And I'm, of course, relieved. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals did the right thing. It was down to the wire. And this isn't the first case. In Texas, there was also the case of Todd Willingham, who was convicted, sentenced to death, and executed on junk science about an arson that was later found to be like, oh, I guess we don't really know that was arson. Yeah. Well, it's too late. He's gone. So, very glad that Mr. Robertson will get a new trial. I don't think a crime occurred, but I'm not one of the scientists, and so I step back. We'll see what happens at that trial.
So given that we're going to talk a little bit about religion and faith intersected with this issue, I know we both appreciate the separation of religion and state,
yes, sir.
But we also want to bring our faith and our religious values into the public sphere. How do you think about how to bring your voice of faith and conscience into the public sphere as something distinct from religion in state?
That's a really good question. So for me, my book and my work, I'm a death penalty researcher. I've been researching the death penalty for 18 years now. And that work on my research is absolutely distinct from my faith. I've had people read my work and say, okay, you're critiquing the death penalty, but how do you really feel about it? It's very much, these are the facts, and I take great pride in being a very careful researcher. Now, behind that is a faith, and for a long time, actually, I thought that these were very, very separate spheres. And I do believe in the separation of church and state very strongly, and so I very much felt that should be separate. This book actually It is all based on research. But this book has been the first opportunity in all of my professional academic career where the Lord has brought into my story my faith. So when people ask me, why did you write this book? I then have to tell them, well, I was researching and it became a book and I didn't want it to be a book, so I put it down. And then I prayed and said, Lord, you know I don't want to write a book. You know I don't want to write a book on lethal injection. But if this is from you, then speak clearly, because if I thought this was from you, none of that would matter. And I was in a hotel room in San Diego, and I reached over. I was kneeling against the bed, reached over to see if there was a Gideon's Bible, and there was, and I just flipped it open, and it opened to Psalm 45. My heart is overflowing with a good theme. I recite my composition concerning the king. My hand is the pen of a ready writer. I said, well, I guess I'm going to write a book on lethal injection. And so that was the beginning of this journey, personally, as I was doing the research for the book. And so, you know, the book, as I say in my epilogue, the research stands for itself.
Yeah, right.
But I now have more to say about the death penalty and the morality of it that just happens to be, as you and I both know, there are certain sects that are religious sects that are kill 'em, and in the name of the Lord.
Yeah, you know, what you said reminds me of a 20th century rabbi I admired named Heschel, who said, we affirm the separation of religion and state, but reject the separation of religion from the human condition.
Oh, that's so good.
And I think about that often, that for me, I think top three things it means to be a religious person is to do what's right over what's popular. You know, to be able to have a compass, kind of in solidarity with the divine, that says,
yes,
between you and I are going to figure out what's right, and then there's going to be implications and repercussions for taking a stand, but this is the space where it gets decided, not socially, you know. So for Jews, there's a phrase that is very foundational in our ethics called Selam Elohim, and you're familiar with it in English. From Genesis, humans are created in the image of God. And that is very fundamental to how we think about human rights. And in your book about the dehumanizing clinical staging of lethal injection, how do you think this impacts society's capacity to see the divine image, even in those who have committed grave crimes?
Yeah. Well, I think the death penalty itself, in order to kill someone, you know, you think about it, killings happen in different ways, right? Some people might be on drugs, on crack or meth or something like that. You could have crimes of passion. The state, when the state kills, it is a cold-hearted, I'm going to set a date, I'm going to line the people, other people are going to file into a room to watch, and I'm going to kill you. And I think if you're willing to kill someone for what they did, if you're willing to kill someone for what they did, everything else is on the table. You have to dehumanize to kill. You have to. And so I think that is, I think other execution methods show the violence of what we're actually doing. And I think the trick about lethal injection is it hides it. It hides it behind medicine. And so I think those things, I think lethal injection is a numbing of us to not recognize the humanity and the light that is in all of us. And, you know, before we went on live, we were talking about some of the other things that you're working on. And I just think, you know, I don't think if we ended the death penalty that it will solve all these other problems. But I will say, what you said, there's a light in all of us because God made us in his image. And when you kill someone, you're really denying that. right? You're saying, I got this one, God.
Yeah.
I know what they deserve. They're worth nothing,
Right.
right? And if I just think, I don't know how we make progress on these other issues when we still think it's okay to kill someone.
Right. And in addition, it implies a certainty that we're sure not only that they need it, but that they were actually guilty. And,
Yeah.
so on that particular point, you write about how states actively conceal botched executions and cover up their failings. The prophet Isaiah warns, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light, Isaiah 5:20. How do you think this moral inversion of presenting executions as clean or as humane shapes public conscience? And how might religious leaders challenge this false narrative?
Okay, first of all, I just have to say, I love a good Isaiah. I love the book of
Yeah, me
Isaiah.
too.
It's actually one
I
of my
named the son
favorite
after him.
books.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so good. So that was like I was just caught in the beauty of Isaiah.
Yeah.
How do I think what again? How
do you think this moral inversion of presenting
yeah,
executions
yeah,
as
yeah.
clean or humane
Yeah.
shapes our public conscience,
Yeah.
and how might religious leaders challenge that false narrative?
Yeah, okay. So, as I was studying lethal injection, I started with this research question, which was really just what researchers do, and it was, why are states so bad at this? Yes, there's the death penalty, but then there's all these torturous deaths, right? Like, why am I seeing 3-hour-long executions, 2-hour-long executions, people waking up in the middle of their execution trying to get off the gurney, autopsies with 18 puncture wounds, right? And so that was how I started, was this research question. As I was going through, and interestingly, the research writing and publication took 7 years. So as I'm going through it, at some point my question changed, and it was, why are states sticking with lethal injection? What is it about lethal injection? Because they can't get the medical professionals, they can't get the drugs, they can't get access to the veins. These people have terrible veins, notoriously bad veins. It costs $1 zillion. They're breaking state and federal laws. What is it? It's not even humane. What is it? And what I've come to see is that lethal injection just does one thing well, only one thing, and that is it hides state violence. It allows us to say this person is just drifting off to forever sleep, and it hides all the physical manifestations of the state violence. So for me, it makes it much easier to not think about, if you ask, what are the political repercussions? What do they get out of this? What they get is a death that doesn't look like death. It's like nothing to see here, so move along. Out of sight, out of mind. And so it hides the brutality of what the death penalty is, which allows the political uses to flourish. And then how can state leaders respond to this? I think there's two ways, and one is calling it what it is. This is state violence. As a person of faith, to a person of faith, I truly believe this is an abomination to God. Like I said, it says we know what this person deserves. We have no idea what the Lord is going to do with that person. No idea. And I've just watched person after person after person become changed, right? And so I think part of it is calling it out, and I think part of it is, Rabbi, we in America have skirted the core issue of the morality of the death penalty. The abolition movement over the past 3-4 decades has been more about, okay, but actual innocence, okay, but arbitrariness, race, cost. There are a gazillion reasons. There are a gazillion reasons without having to get to the actual morality. I think faith leaders can say, yeah, all of those things too. This is a bad policy. But set aside all of that stuff and let's actually get to what this is and whether or not it is morally and spiritually justifiable.
Yeah, on that point of judgment, one of the greatest of Jewish philosophers and legal decisors, Maimonides, he ruled that you can't do anything to block someone's teshuvah, repentance.
Oh my gosh.
That everyone should have pathways towards repentance, and if you do anything to try to get in the way of that's a fundamental theological error and moral error. And so I think of cutting off someone's pathway towards that lifelong process of returning to our core goodness. So
that's so good.
You describe how lethal injection was sold to the public as a humane method of execution, largely through the symbolism and staging, like the medical sounding procedures, the cleanliness, etc., even while many of the underlying practices violate that promise. From a moral religious perspective, how important is that symbolic presentation? Like, does it make the injustice worse, or is it simply misleading?
I mean, I think if it perpetuates injustice, it makes it worse. Mm-hmm. And just to put a fine point on that, when we're talking about this symbolism, it's like, why are they on a gurney? Mm-hmm. Why are they on a gurney? Why put them there? You could put them on anything. Yeah. You could put them in a dentist chair. You could have them sitting up. You could use the electric chair, actually. We don't. Why are they on a gurney? Why do they have a white sheet over them? Why are these people in lab coats? Why do executioners swab the arm with alcohol before injecting the drugs that will kill them? It's all stagecraft. Yeah. And I think it is damaging not only to democracy, right? Because what I hear among courts and politicians, well, the American public supports this. Actually, what you've done is you have hidden what the death penalty actually is, which suggests to me that the public doesn't actually, if the public knew, then they wouldn't support it or would support it much less, knowing, by the way, Gallup recorded public support at 53%. So, it's close already. Right. So I'm like, I think it's damaging for democracy. I think it's damaging for the medical profession.
Yeah, so speaking of the medical profession, in the course of your research, what have you learned about the role of pathologists, medical professionals, or scientific experts in either enabling or resisting abuses in lethal injection protocols? And how do the ethical obligations of healers or scientists intersect with the demands of the state in this context?
I mean, this Hippocratic oath. Yeah. I have a whole chapter, which I'm actually super proud of that, because in lethal injection discussions, the medical professions kind of gets, pushed away. I delve into it, and what's really interesting, I already knew about the Hippocratic oath, do no harm. What I didn't understand is that's 5000 BC, and the long version of the Hippocratic oath actually has a line that says, "Nor shall I deliver any deadly drugs." So it is actually specifically in the Hippocratic oath. And what I've come to learn is that it's not just an ethical obligation. When you talk to the medical professionals, what they say is, it's not just an obligation like something foisted upon us. This is who we are. It is embedded in the meaning of what it means to be a healer, is not to be a killer. Right. And I will also say, since we are here together, that one of the traumas in the medical profession's history is the Nazi doctors. And so I actually talk about that in the book as well. And as I say in the book, it's really perilous to talk about that in the context of lethal injection, or to make any sort of. And
in Arizona, they talk about gas chambers.
But what the medical profession says, what they have said is, we have participated in state killing on behalf of the state, and this is what happened, and we can never, ever, ever go near state killing again. And so, I think that is part of that story. Yeah.
So to move towards action a little bit, you show that many botched executions are not isolated glitches, but the result of systemic secrecy, incompetence, and lawbreaking. Can you speak about what avenues for reform you believe are realistic, or perhaps whether the system is just so broken that reform is insufficient? And what would accountability look like in a system that's built from concealment?
How much time do you have? No, but so I don't make this isn't a book where I make an argument and try to convince you I'm right. This is a book where I relentlessly document what the state is doing in our name. That said, I think it would be very hard to read my book and say, oh yeah, if we just do this or if we just do that, lethal injection can be fixed. I don't think so. Again, I don't make that argument. I let readers come to their own conclusion. But one thing I will say is, you know, states, we just talked about doctors. That is a problem endemic to lethal injection. It's a problem inherent in an execution method that uses medicine to kill. You're not going to fix that problem. Same with the drugs. You know, these drugs, these are pharmaceutical medicines. And the pharmaceutical companies, you know, whatever other issues they have, they're like, these are medicines. And we made them to heal for longer lives, not to make people promptly die. And so, you know, these are problems endemic in lethal injection that you're not going to be able to fix. And what I document is that every time a serious problem has come to light, like when you do have a doctor, well, the one that Missouri used had over 20 malpractice suits against him, had his hospital privileges revoked at 2 hospitals, was censured by the medical board. What was the response in Missouri? The very next year, passed a statute saying it is unlawful for you to expose a current or former executioner. And by the way, where did this guy go after a court said you may not participate in any any executions by lethal injection? He was hired by the state of Arizona. Within months, did an execution for Arizona. Arizona knowing everything that had happened in Missouri. And so, you know, the state's response is secrecy. And one more thing, Rabbi, that I would add is that when states were adopting lethal injection, I got into the legal history, I presented. Yes, there were some legislators that were talking about a humane death, based on nothing at all, but okay. But one of the surprising finds was a lot of people were actually not talking about a humane death. They were talking about a humane-looking death. And at the time, a federal court had found a First Amendment right to televise executions. Now, it wouldn't last, but nobody could have known that. And so there are legislators that I quote saying, oh, we can't have an electrocution in someone's living room. Right? That's not going to fly. Right. So a lot of this is about looking humane.
You know, yes. You know, the Jewish community just finished our high holiday season. And what we say over and over is, Melech Hafetz B'Chaim, that God loves life. God wants life. That's the top 3 themes of the whole thing. Zochreinu L'Chaim. Remember us for life. Melech Hafetz B'Chaim, O King who desires life. V'katvenu b'sefer hachayim, and write us in the book of life. Lamancha Elohim Chayim, for the sake of living God, right? To be godly is to be alive. This is a God who remembers life, who desires life, who inscribes us in the book of life for the sake of a living God. That it's easy to forget, and I can't speak to Christianity at all, but how central to the Jewish faith life is itself. Not even just quality of life, but just existing, and how fundamental that is to our moral duty to preserve and sanctify life. So I have so many more things to ask you, but in the interest of time, last question. I already mentioned Rabbi Heschel. I'll quote him again. Famously, he says, in a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible. In light of your book, what responsibility do you believe ordinary citizens, people listening today, and specifically faith communities, bear in confronting the injustices of lethal injection and the death penalty today?
Oh, again, how much time do you have? Not much, I know. You know, one of the things when I have people who routinely ask me, what can I do? One thing I ask is, can you pledge to have this conversation with 5 people. 5 people. Whether you're sharing secrets of the book, whether you're talking about life, and by the way, the new Pope, I'm not Catholic, but the new Pope just quoted a couple days ago and said, if you are for the death penalty, you are not pro-life. Right? It's so simple. Pro-death is not pro-life. Like, tell me I'm wrong, right? Like, and I love what you said about redemption. And because that too is a core theme of Christianity. And woe be to the person, to the community, to the state, to the political leaders, to the political body that stands in the way of a person's redemption. I'm a former prosecutor, and I have said, actually, I'd almost rather have someone's blood on my hands than their soul on my hands. And so I think we have a responsibility to have these conversations. Vote. I mean, in a democracy, vote. I'm reminded of a man who was executed in Utah. Maybe this was 1912 or something. He was a labor activist. It was a wrongful killing, but in any event, his last words were, "Do not mourn, organize."
Yeah, that's right.
So I think we'll leave it with that.
Thank you. So in addition to what you shared, in honor of or commemoration of world abolition of the death penalty today, I encourage folks to consider picking up this book here, Secrets of the Killing State. As was shared, Professor Lain is not telling us what all to think, but is documenting some crucial facts and history that we should be accounting for, and open up some conversations in your community around what it means to what it means for us to be complicit in this, and what does our Jewish tradition say about this? Because the simple bit of it, if you just look at some biblical text, you'll come up with a certain conclusion. But if you look at the rabbinic tradition, it's that the rabbis actually undermine those biblical texts. They really reinterpret them in ways that account for the moral complexity of what's involved here. So, and I hope you'll also look up some other writings of Professor Lain, and maybe even invite her to community for a book talk. Thank you so much for this time.
Thank you so much.